coffee. In fact, we just heard from Zoom that we're recording in progress. So with that said, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Helen Torres, the CEO of HOPE, Hispanas Organized for Political Equality. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization committed to ensuring political and economic parity for Latinas through leadership, advocacy, and education to benefit all communities and the status of women. Today, we're starting off our series of conversations with mayoral candidates. As we all know, Los Angeles is the city with the highest concentration of registered Latina voters. It's crucial for all of us to be engaged in our mayoral candidates discussions and getting out to vote. That's why we're very excited to have candidate Mr. Rick Caruso join us. Welcome, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I have my coffee. It says Heffa Moves. But I also see that you have an incredible dog in the background.
That's Hudson.
I'm sorry, the name again?
His name is Hudson.
Hudson. I love it. He heard it. He heard it. He's coming over.
He's my buddy. I get him.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Caruso, for joining us. We wanted to start with the question of your vision for Los Angeles. And if you can also include why you're running for mayor.
Sure. Well, let me start with running for mayor first, if you don't mind. Hold on one second. Let me just get something. Okay, we had to just grab Hudson. He was going out on a balcony. So we're going to get a little babysitter for Hudson. Sorry.
That's okay. We want to protect Hudson.
We got to protect Hudson. Listen, I'm running for mayor because I have grown up in this city. I started my business in the city. I've raised my family in this city. Tina and I have raised our 4 children here. We've been married for 35 years, together for 37. I would have never been able to build my business if it wasn't for the city of Los Angeles, whether it's Grove or any place else. And every day, Angelenos reward me by showing up and spending time on my properties and spending money. But most importantly, creating memories and enriching lives. And that's what I think Los Angeles needs to do more of. I remember a city that was much more livable, much safer. We didn't have the homeless situation that we've had. And I really do believe that the system is broken and is failing Los Angeles. And about a year and a half ago, my wife and I were driving back home, and we were talking about all the issues that Los Angeles had. And I said, you know, Tina, I've already served under 3 mayors, Tom Bradley, Dick Reardon, and Jim Hahn. I love public service, but I believe public service has to literally be serve the public. And I think I can help. And, you know, we discussed it. We discussed it with the kids. And I really just am motivated by giving back and making LA more livable, polished up, cleaner. And also, and I'll close on this, my grandparents, both sides, immigrated from Italy. They didn't have a dime in their pocket. They didn't speak the language. My paternal grandparents moved to Boyle Heights after a little time in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. My grandfather was a gardener. They were the most humble, dear, good people. But like so many people have immigrated to this country, all they cared about was an opportunity to have their share of the American dream. And what has really broken my heart is how many people now, their dream is dampened because of the prime problem, affordability problem, homeless problem. I've been abundantly blessed and have more of American dream than I ever expected in my life. And I was raised where you give back to the community, and that's what I want to do.
Well, thank you for that. I also wanted, I think I would be remiss if I didn't speak to the heartbreaking events that's happened in City Council this past week. And how does that impact the vision that you have for Los Angeles and the goals that you have for Los Angeles?
I'm a pretty motivated person. When I set a goal, I'm very motivated and very focused. I am more motivated today to be mayor because of that than ever before, as motivated as I was. And let me tell you why. I've been talking about the system being broken in Los Angeles since the day I announced back in February, early March, whatever it was. And I got a lot of pushback. People saying you shouldn't judge career politicians and it's not a bad thing. Of course, it's not a bad thing. But it does become a bad thing when you have career politicians that are in it for themselves and disrespect those that they are paid to serve. Like I said, this is a public service job. And every day you have to wake up and say, what can I do to serve the public, not serve yourself? So to take a group of people in senior leadership in a back room, carving up the city like it's their personal property, and then disrespecting so many cultures, it was unbelievable. And then very heartbreaking, because I am very close with the Latino community, and I know there's a lot of diversity within the Latino community that has worked so hard to get where you're at, and you're 50% of the city, to see your leadership frankly betray you and disappoint you, I think is just very sad. And more than ever, an outsider needs to come in to fix it. An insider can't, no matter how well-intended an insider is. And you see that playing out now. You see it playing out now in the city council where they can't even hold a meeting. Quite frankly, that's not leadership. They should be doing the business of government and not allowing people that are trying to destroy the government or interfere with the government to give them control of it. So I think that's a major mistake. That isn't what leadership looks like to me. But I am very sorry for the Latino community in particular of having to go through this. But I do hope they realize that their vote really is their voice, especially now more than ever. And my commitment I have to the Latino community, which I made early on, to have the government that I put together represent the community, which means 50%.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Caruso. I think also, if I may weigh in our conversation, I think the next leader needs to be a unifier, someone that brings all communities together and be very inclusive in their leadership. Moving to that topic a little bit, the questions that I'll be asking you, I just wanted to put them in a format for you to understand that they're informed by the research that Hope has conducted. We do a lot of original research with a variety of university partners. And this is what we're hearing from our women that we have surveyed, both here in California and Los Angeles, but some of the conversations are also national. As you know, Los Angeles is a global city, the second largest city in our wonderful country. So I do want to weigh in a little bit, or kind of lean in a little bit in that conversation about representation. Fostering a more representative democracy is at the center of what HOPE stands for, around ensuring economic and political parity. We're strong advocates for our democracy. We're actively seeking always great Latinas qualified to serve, especially in underrepresented fields, on commissions such as fire, police, a variety of different public works. In the city of Los Angeles, as you've already mentioned, is not only 50% Latinos, 50.5% women, 23% of those are Latinas. As mayor, what specific plans do you have to create a framework for equitable appointments? How will you support women in seeking and serving on boards and commissions?
Well, I would ask you to also look at my track record of what I've done in my company, because I believe the past is predictive of the future. I've turned my company over to a very smart and wonderful executive, Corinne Verderay here, who's a member of the AAPI community. But more broadly, about 50% of our company are women, and women with managerial authority. In the city of Los Angeles, first of all, my commitment when I was in Boyle Heights, I was in the Pico Union area, was that commissions will be designated by the representation. My commitment to the Latino community was 50%. That also goes through with women. We have to have more women in leadership positions in the city. And I'm not saying that just to be politically correct. I'm saying that because I want my administration to look like those they serve, Because if you're in public service, you have to be able to understand the cultures, the issues, be able to work on the solutions to help those you serve. And when you look at what I did as president of the police commission, I took it over under Jimmy Hahn with a majority white male police department. And by the time I left, it was a majority minority police department for the very reason about service. So that is my commitment, and I want you to hold me to it. Also, just take it one step more. We being the city has done a very bad job in giving business to women-owned small businesses. And we need to do a much better job on that. We need to make sure the procurement process is streamlined, and we need to make sure we make it a priority because small businesses are the backbone of Los Angeles.
Well, thank you, Mr. Caruso, because you also touched on another key point that's really important to Latinas, and but also Hope is to encourage that entrepreneurial growth. Hope advises that more governmental and corporate investments are needed in Latina and minority-owned micro businesses and small businesses. As mayor, you touched upon this a little bit more, but this is your opportunity to expand on this. What efforts will you make to ensure we believe the 4.5 billion per year the city spends on procurement goods and services also include Latino-run businesses? And how do you scale up from your perspective that government can help micro businesses scale up to be ready for some of those opportunities?
Yeah, well, first of all, it starts with what we have to do is cutting down crime and encampments on the streets, because we have so many small businesses, including Latino-owned businesses, that are struggling because they're spending so much money or losing customers because of the areas that they're in. You look at Christy Vega, for example, who, Casa Vega has been in this city for 60 years, a Latina-owned business. The amount of money she's spending on security to protect her employees, protect it from people coming in and stealing food off of people's table and building walls around the patio restaurants is crazy. So you have to start with a much bigger problem, because the city could do a lot and should do a lot more in getting dollars to Latina and Latino-owned businesses. But it also has to be able to have a platform where businesses can succeed. We need to deregulate it. We need to streamline business permits. A small business has very thin margins. I started as a small business. I realize that we're in an inflationary time. So the city of Los Angeles should reduce the cost, allow people to be more profitable. So we hire more, expand our economy, give training to those who need it, who are starting and running small businesses, so they know how to work with the city of Los Angeles, and have a directive with the city of Los Angeles to make sure there's an exact percentage that is going to women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. I did this when I was at Department of Water and Power very successfully under Tom Bradley. We had very clear rules, very clear goals, and we were held to those goals. And that's the way I would set it up. But we also have to have a support system, because as you know, many people that start a small business are incredibly creative and motivated. But like I was, I didn't know all the P's and Q's about running a business, right? And so fortunately, I had a lot of help along the way. The city of Los Angeles needs to have a lot of help so somebody builds their business. And I would have a separate department in the mayor's office that's just focused on small businesses and streamlining what they need.
I'll share this. I'm not sure if it where the project landed, but when we were doing our research, Latina small businesses, especially the micro businesses, financing was the biggest barrier. Not only getting the capital, but also the paperwork to get the capital and to prove themselves, right? Even though they had strong proof of concept by their hard work and their customers. The city.
Can I just add one more thing to that? Because that's a really good point. And that's why I issued this Bill of Rights for small businesses. I don't know if you saw that. Very detailed a few weeks ago. And one of the things I really believe is in small businesses, including very separate building affordable housing, is use the full faith and credit of the city of Los Angeles to guarantee loans, to buy down the cost of loans so a small business can afford to borrow and cut through that red tape.
That's an incredible idea. I wanted to add that I know one of the cities, I'm not sure if they implemented it, maybe it's something that you can think through, is that the city of San Jose was looking to have, if you will, volunteer CPAs working with their micro businesses and small
Great
businesses.
idea.
So just wanted to share that with you. You mentioned public safety in addressing our small businesses and micro businesses and what they have to deal with. Women often experience violence at the hand of domestic partners. And
Yeah.
so there is the public safety conversation that we've been hearing quite a bit in these debates that you've been participating in around homelessness, around crime rising, coming up in the city. But oftentimes we don't hear it from another lens of how women are experiencing violence
Mhm.
as well at the hand of their domestic violent partners. Undocumented children and women are victims of sex trafficking rings. And there seems to be a lack of faith in the police force and how in the criminal justice system and how they overall solve crimes without prejudice or racism. So I know there's a lot to unpack in that one big statement, but if you could take a chance at it and
Yeah.
share your viewpoints on that.
I would love to do that. I actually have been talking about this. Probably not enough, but I've been talking about it. And one way I started talking about it probably a couple months ago was in the race for the city attorney, where we have Fazil Gill, endorsed by Karen Bass, who said, I do not want to prosecute misdemeanors. And I reminded everybody at a press conference that a misdemeanor also includes domestic abuse. It's not about running in and stealing a pair of sneakers. So the minute you have that kind of discussion going on in culture, you're exasperating the problem. And I wouldn't tolerate that at all. In my company, as I ran USC, as I ran LAPD, as I ran DWP, zero tolerance. But the city of Los Angeles also has to have zero tolerance. And it actually starts in the mayor office in terms of culture. And we have to enforce the law and hold people accountable. As many people don't realize, and I do because I'm the only candidate that's ever been responsible to oversee a police department, LAPD, one of the most dangerous calls an officer is called to is domestic violence. In fact, an officer, while I was president of the commission, was killed because of going to a call on domestic violence. So it also starts with training the officer properly on how to deal with it, but also making sure that the woman feels comfortable and trusts calling LAPD to respond and actually does respond. When you have a situation where you're 800 officers short, when you have a situation that you had an administration that defunded the police, what you're doing is you're raising the chances that a woman feels unheard and probably will be unheard, at least in terms of being able to respond to, because we just don't have enough officers in order to do it in a meaningful way. And that really worries me. And I will change that. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it's something that I would never tolerate my personal life or my life as mayor. And everybody would know that.
Mr. Caruso, you mentioned the training of the police officers. In your previous roles, what do you think has been working well and what would you like to change? Because oftentimes what we hear, even the best trained individuals, once they start going into the culture of a LAPD, things starts changing. So
Yeah.
do you see a connection there? Do you see a need for cultural change within the LAPD?
You know, it's interesting because again, when I came in as president of the police commission, there was a terrible culture. And it was right after the Rodney King beating. Crime was spiking. Officers were leaving. There was more officers leaving than coming into the academy. The department was under a federal consent decree, which means that literally a federal court was overseeing the department because it was so broken. And I went in and made a very tough decision. It wasn't a tough decision. It was a tough political decision for others because the chief at that time was very well liked, but he was not the right leader. And this goes to culture. the discipline system was such that it was actually causing crime to rise because officers were not engaging in the right way in order to prevent crime. The most important thing you can do that I learned running LAPD, you have to build trust with the community you serve. It starts with who you hire, and then it goes with how you train them. And then it's ongoing training. The training and the reforming of a department never stops. We change the hiring, we change the training, we change the rules of engagement. We spent a lot of time in the community. We built trust, made so many reforms. The court gave control back to the civilian commission. We actually dropped crime by 30% to levels not seen since 1950 and hired 800 officers and instituted community policing, which is critically important, and senior lead officers that look and understand the community they're serving and are on the streets. You have to build trust. There will be communities that always will not like the cops, but you want them to at least trust the cops. And to your point, culture can shift. It starts with the chief, it starts with the mayor and the commission. But it also starts with ongoing training and checking in and having zero tolerance for bad behavior. Because there are communities in Los Angeles, and rightfully so, that are worried if the police are going to harm them or not respect them. And you have to constantly break down those barriers and have discussions. And if you look at my track record when I was the police commissioner, we accomplished it. I was very proud of what we accomplished, not just in reducing crime, but the trust we developed in the communities that we served.
Mr. Caruso, as we're talking about what women are facing, if it's domestic partner violence, if it's victims of sex trafficking rings, we also have to talk about sexual harassment, and specifically in and out of the workplace. Sexual harassment and assault, as we all know, is unacceptable. We all deserve to work in a safe environment, and it's a basic human right. And so we can close these inequities and strive for economic and political parity. As mayor, what specific actions will you take to safeguard women and men working inside and outside of City Hall? And what efforts and legislations have you been able to either implement, throughout your career to create safe work environments?
It's a good question. I would do very similar what I did at USC when I took over as chair. We had obviously the most terrible incident was happening with Dr. Tyndall and what he was abusing women, students. I did a full audit of what our protocols and procedures were in this and how we were handling it, what kind of warning systems we had, rules, engagement. Did we have enough people in our human relations department, personnel department to be able to deal with it? Did we have the right protocols for things to be reported and best practices so that women felt safe in reporting it, which is critically important? And were we responding to it in a way that people felt that they were safe and it was actually taken seriously? And that is a culture that you have to, but you need to start with a full audit. And one of the first things I would do, and already had planned on doing as mayor, is having a full audit of the protocols. I would suspect, given the size of Los Angeles, the amount of employees, that we do not have the adequate infrastructure to make sure that we are protecting our women employees throughout the city and in so many different locations and in so many different departments. The complication is, which I faced at USC, but we tackled it, is different cultures within different departments. Just like we had different cultures within different schools at USC. And so you have to dig deep. It's not just what happens up at the mayor's office and what we sort of mandate. It's going down and looking at who are the people that are running the human relations personnel departments in every single department. And is there alignment with the rules and protocol and best practices that we're bringing in at the mayor's office? It's a big task. I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
I forgot I muted because my boys are just arriving from high school. So there may be a little bit of
What high
noise in the background. Los Osos I live out in Rancho Cucamonga area, so Los
Right.
Osos High School.
Nice.
So my apologies, I did mute just in case you
I-
didn't hear all the screaming.
I love, and listen, I got 4 kids and the background is great. Mine are a little older than yours, but it's still the best.
I did want to ask a couple of additional questions that came up from the chat, if you're okay with that.
Sure. Ask
One
anything you want.
is that you've approached when discussing affordability in Los Angeles, and what are your plans to address housing specifically? As I mentioned, I live out here in the San Bernardino area. There's a reason, since our headquarters of Hope is in downtown Los Angeles,
Yeah.
that I have to commute almost 2 hours. So,
Right.
and that's the cost of housing. What are your thoughts and plans for the future of Los Angeles?
And the fact that you have to do that, Helen, is a big loss to the city. It's an incredible burden on you. But here's how I look at it, especially women. You have 2 shifts. You go to work, that's shift number 1. You go home, you're back on duty. Now you got shift number 2. And on the way home, you're typically, maybe you have to stop and get groceries. You have to do whatever you have to do, especially as a mom, a wife. You go home, you're back at work. Those 2 hours are a precious 2 hours that's been taken away from your family and also from your health, right? We have got to have affordability in Los Angeles, in particular for, in addition to women like yourself, professional women, fire, police, and teachers. They shouldn't be driving 2 hours to work. We want them to live in the city. If you're going to hire the best and the brightest, you want to make their city livable for them. We have to streamline the process of housing. It should not take 2 to 3 years to get a permit. We've made it so expensive in Los Angeles. People go other places to build. Housing rises because of short supply, because we're 500,000 units short. I have a program, it's on my website, carusocan.com, but it includes for affordable housing, have DWP put in the infrastructure and amortize it over 30 or 40 years, rather than putting in the infrastructure and giving a developer a bill. The developer has to guarantee a certain low rent that's affordable. The city will come in and backstop it with their full faith and credit, guarantee the loan to buy the cost down. And we bring public and private partnerships together, guarantee that rent for 30 years, and start building. Get permits out within 6 months, not 3 years. I'm a builder. I have been processing permits in the city of Los Angeles for 35 years. I know what works. I know what doesn't work. And I've seen the change over 35 years. It's horrific. And that's why, and I was just with a group of people from Glendale. If you just go, I don't know if you've ever been to my project, the Americana brand in Glendale. We redeveloped it. Stand in the intersection where LA's on one side and Glendale's on the other side. Glendale has a massive amount of apartments that have been built and condominiums and housing, and LA has none. That's all you need to know. And Glendale has been very business friendly. So that's what I'm going to be bringing to LA. I want you back in LA, Helen.
Believe me, you may know where I originated when I moved from Michigan to Los Angeles, and I lived in a little bit for a Glendale, but then I got a wonderful 1-bedroom apartment, Spanish style, right on 3rd Street and Crescent Heights. So that's the property I'm more familiar with that you have.
Okay, you're moving back to the Grove. You're moving back. We want you back.
Thank you for that. I want to end with another serious question and then a more lighthearted one. It is a Friday afternoon after all, and it's been, I got to tell you, a really difficult, heartbreaking week.
I'm sorry for your week. I really am. From the bottom of my heart.
Thank you for that. I'm sorry for our city.
Yeah,
I'm very sad for our city right now, but I'm also, you can't run an organization by the name of Hope and not be hopeful and look forward to a good future. So, and I believe that we have incredible leaders that are ready to step up. But with that said, homelessness, we touched upon this a little bit. how do we finally help individuals that are living in these encampments find real permanent homes?
It can be done. I wouldn't be running for a job that I didn't think I could do with success. I don't plan on ending my career on a failure. When you take a look at best practices, we did a white paper, what's working all around the country, different cities. And just let me remind you very respectfully, and I flew back for a quick meeting with Eric Adams. New York City houses 90%, 96% of their homeless. LA houses 30%. And you know, well, the Latino population on the streets continues to grow. It's heartbreaking. Okay. Look at the organizations in Los Angeles that have actually been incredibly successful. Downtown Women's Center, People Concern, Wine Garden, Goodwill, Salvation Army. People Concern has a success rate of 94% of those that they house and give services to do not go back to homelessness. There is a path to success. What we've been doing is the same old thing that isn't working. And Karen's plan and my plan are very different plans, because I know that I have to get people off the street very quickly, give them wraparound services, mental health care, drug addiction care, retraining, right? Have them feel safe, do it with dignity, do it with humanity, build places that people feel good about living in. I think these little homes are not. I was out near one today. It's a disaster in Lincoln Heights. I was meeting with the residents out there this morning. And do it in a way that gives them hope, gives them a better way of life. Because what we've done, not so far, the city of Los Angeles has done so far, is absolutely inhumane with the amount of people living and dying on the streets. So like any good business person, you study what doesn't work, you study what does work, you amplify and lean into what does work. And there may be pockets that we're going to have to pivot and change, but that's the beauty of having somebody that with a business background. But I do think, to your point, it can be solved. My plan calls for a state of emergency, 30,000 beds, but we have to be building actual low-income, sustainable apartments at the same time, and not just keeping shelters. But we can't wait to do that to get them off the street. You have to be doing both and combine it with services.
So we do have about a little less than 10 minutes, and we got 2 more questions before I get to the lighthearted one. Because these
Okay.
are good questions. One is the continuation of the conversation around homelessness, but from the lens that our transgender, our gay and lesbian fellow residents, citizens, people that we care about, are been disproportionately impacted by homelessness, economic development, and discrimination. How do you ensure that all Angelenos are taken care of? And knowing that there are key areas in our community and key individuals that are really being targeted by discrimination.
Yeah, well, and that's why we have hate crimes and hate incidents. Hate incidents are up 200% in 2 years. Zero reason for that. Absolutely unacceptable. I've spent time at the LGBTQI LA Center. I have spent a lot of time in that community. It is a big part of our business, by the way, is having that community feel safe on our properties, which they do. We make a special effort of that. But as you know, one of the biggest problems that's happening in that community is young people getting thrown out of their homes or not accepted, ending up on the streets. The LA Center is doing incredible work. If you haven't visited lately, look at the housing that they've built, the programs that they have. You know, they have their chef program, training kids to be chefs and whatnot. It's miracle work. It's another one of those programs that I would help expand. But in order to understand it, I've got to be out in the field and in the streets and meeting with people. But my administration, going back to what we talked about, needs to look like the community we're serving. And we need to have representation in the mayor's office from that community, pure and simple. And we have to say, and this is also going back to what happened the last couple of days. We can never tolerate that one part of our community succeeds at the expense of another part of our community. I believe that everybody rises together. One part of our community does better, we're all doing better. And if we all lock arms and work together, but people need to see action. There's a big difference between my opponent's track record and performance and mine. It's one thing to convene meetings. I built my career on convening meetings and pulling people together and finding common ground. I can't build the Grove unless I'm finding common ground. But then people need to see tangible action and something they can touch and feel and makes their lives better and gives them hope. Then you're really moving forward. And that's what I plan on doing.
So you touched upon this again. I love how you're kind of really segueing very nicely in some of these questions. Incoming council members, we have an incredible group of progressive mindset council members coming in. Perhaps they don't think and see the world quite the way you do, Mr. Caruso, but as mayor, you have to find ways to work with everyone. How do you establish working partnerships and work with individuals that don't have the same ideology as you do?
Well, let me again start with saying that, and it's a really important question. One of the most progressive members of the council is Mike Bonin. I think we would all agree with that. And was, by the way, terribly hurt by what happened. And I've known Mike and Sean and their kids for a long time. We've gone to mass together for Christmas Eve for many, many years before COVID. But we differ greatly on politics. He was the council member, is the council member for our project in Pacific Palisades, where we were building a new downtown right next to a residential neighborhood in a city that was anti-development with a councilman that was anti-development. We got a 15-0 vote. We never did an EIR. It was under a mitigated negative deck and not one lawsuit, because I spent time in the community listening, learning, and finding common ground. And we had the full support of Mike Bonin. So I know how to do it. We're not going to agree on everything for sure. But what we are going to agree on is finding common ground to move forward. And I believe in the goodness of people, that the goodness of people will want this city to move forward. And we're going to find ways to do that together. But what you can't have is a mayor that doesn't stand up for what's right for Angelenos, right? And has the strength and courage to say, that may be a really interesting idea. Stop. We're not going to go defund the police again. Stop. You take a look at the new council person that replaced Gil Cedillo. She's an abolitionist. So yes, there's going to be things we're going to greatly disagree on. And you're going to want a mayor that stands their ground and has the strength of character to do it if something isn't in the best interest of every Angeleno.
So I promised you a fun question.
Okay.
Okay, so this is supposed to be a virtual coffee, but if you when you pick your coffee up, how do you take it? How do you enjoy it?
Oh, I'm black.
Oh, okay, so am I. That's it.
I'm just good. I love the taste of coffee.
Okay.
Now,
right.
How many cups of coffee do you drink a day?
I try to stop at 2.
Oh my God. That's my early mornings too. I really love the taste of coffee. It's crazy. Yeah. I hope it's not really bad for you, but I also drink a lot of water because it dehydrates you.
There you go. I think you're caught right there. You know, I'm Puerto Rican. So my grandfather, he started a farm growing coffee. And it's been hard times in Puerto Rico, as you know, with the hurricanes. And it takes 3 years to grow a coffee plant. So right as we were, right as the farm was coming back alive, this recent hurricane happened. But so we were raised with in the Latino community, you usually have café con leche and your pan, your bread and coffee in the morning with a lot of sugar. But I always, even as a kid, took it black. So I don't know what that says about my strength and what I need in the morning to wake up and tackle the world. But I thank you, sir, for the time that you've devoted to this conversation. We look forward to seeing how our city unites together. And we're looking forward to getting out the vote in this upcoming election. And I hope everyone does go out to vote. And thank you for your time, sir.
Can I just end with one thing?
Sure.
Well, it's very similar in the Italian culture. You have your coffee, it's got a lot of sugar. My grandparents, I remember when I stayed with them. And then, of course, we have our little biscotti in the morning, right? And of course, my grandfather, there was always a little bit of something in it also. There's a little bit of little whiskey. Yeah, something else went in there, but it's a ton of sugar and foam on the top. But I just got to tell you, and I'm just saying this from the bottom of my heart for the people that know me, you've got a great energy to you. And you absolutely line up with your organization. I love your organization's name. And I would leave you with this for everybody in the city to think about. And I said it on the debate the other night, and I really believe this. In the midst of the worst tragedy or crisis, there is always good things that come from it, as long as you're working to find the good thing. And as bad as what happened a few days ago, I'm going to work to find that good thing, because I think it's going to change the trajectory of the city and the standards that we all demand of our leadership and hold people accountable. So I'm actually very hopeful as I enter into the last 3 weeks of this race. And thank you very much for your time. It's great meeting you.
Great meeting you, sir. And thank you.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Take care.
Bye-bye.